Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the May 7th, 2019 meeting of West Grey Council. Thank you all for being here. We have all members of council present. That represents a quorum for this council. So that is our call to order, item 1. We are now on item 2, which is a moment of reflection. Please stand if you're able to do so and have the moment of reflection. Thank you. Item 3 is declarations of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof. Members of council? Thank you. Item 4, closed session. We do not have any today. Item 5, matters arising from closed session, NA. We're now swiftly getting on to item 6, which is comment period. Anyone from the audience, do you wish to provide a comment to council? Mr. Miller. It would be fantastic if you go to the podium. Are you okay to press the side button? Thanks very much.
The side button needs
That's fine.
How many buttons do we have? Thank you, Mayor and Council. As I was saying, my eyesight is not as good as it used to be, so going through these minutes, sometimes I go through 3 times and still don't get my answer. And minutes from a meeting back a while ago, it talked about a communications officer. Now, it kind of left me in the dark because I had no idea what the communications officer would do. Do we have one now, or are we going to get one?
Very good comment, and I'll move that over to our Chief Administrative Officer, Laura Johnston, for a brief response, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for the question. The position is a combination of communications, which would include website and social media, which we don't do social media right now, increased outreach to the community. The other piece of the position is administration support in the building to help me and help council with some of the administration matters. And the third piece of the job is to be compliant with the Accessibility for Ontario's with Disability Act, AODA, which are deadlines of 2020 and 2021 that we have to be compliant. So there's a few pieces to this position.
Okay, thank you. I sometimes wonder if the money wouldn't be better spent for bridges.
That is definitely the focus of this council as well. Thank you, Mr. Miller. I appreciate that. All right, seeing that there's no one else in the audience, I'm going to move on to item 7, which is public meetings. We do not have any. Item 8 starts our Part 1 consent agenda. I do have before me a motion which is moved by Councillor Hergert, seconded by Councillor Townsend. Be it resolved that items 1A to 1B, inclusive contained in Part 1 consent agenda, be adopted as amended, and further that the authorization be given for the action to be taken as may be necessary to give effect to the recommendations contained therein. Clerk Turner, could you speak to the amendment?
There's a number of amendments that went back and forth between councils, so I'm not sure if I'll capture quite all of them, but in the April 23rd Committee of the Whole minutes, for instance, there was a mention on the number of structures alluded to in the study, and I had noted 106 structures, and in the report it speaks to 104 structures, but the 106, there was 2 that included the Neustadt and Durham dams, so I added that as a reference. And then on the April 30th Committee of the Whole minutes, a number of changes, not necessarily in order, that I'll speak to them. Page 5, under new business major conferences, I noted instead of being no updates, that it was actually deferred until the next Committee of the Whole meeting. There was then some discussion in the the Director of Infrastructure's report on the Bentic and Durham landfill annual monitoring reports, where it spoke about the pending closure of the Durham landfill site within a few years, and the wording was somewhat changed to note that there'd certainly be budget implications to be dealt with as opposed to dealing with net loss of revenue. So it's just more relating to the budget. There might have been a few little other minor typos, but that, I believe, meets most of the amendments that were noted by council or requested.
Thank you. Questions? All right. Councillor Hamilton, please.
Sure. There was, yeah, is that okay? So there was one more amendment on page 5 of the Committee of the Whole minutes, April 30th, which Clerk Turner is acknowledging he received. The motion says Durham Horticulture Society, but it shouldn't instead say Durham Agricultural Society. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you for that clarification. All right, I am calling the question on the motion. All those in favor? Pardon me. Sorry, pardon me. Councillor Shea.
If I want to discuss anything in here, I have to ask it to be lifted, right?
That is correct.
Could I have item C1 lifted, please?
Okay, C1 is
Correspondence?
a bit later. That is next on the agenda.
Isn't that part of the consent agenda?
It is A1 to B1 inclusive is what we're voting on. And then there's an opportunity under the miscellaneous that I was going to address next for pulling the items.
Okay, sure.
Okay. Okay, so we'll deal with this motion, and then I will be asking if there's any items under miscellaneous correspondence, which represents C1 and C2, if any member of council wishes to pull that. But thank you very much for that clarification before I did call this motion. All right? All right, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? It does carry. Councillor Shea, would you like to proceed with your item to lift out of the miscellaneous correspondence?
Yes, I'd like to lift item C1 for discussion.
That is C1, which is Jeff and Karen Bites, letter re Kennedy Bridge. So that discussion we can take under new business. Clerk Turner, that is item 14, so a bit later in the agenda. So noted to be lifted. C1. Is there any other item, members of council? All right, thank you. Part 2, regular agenda, is communications under item 9 from mayor and members of council. All right. Right. Okay, thank you, Clerk Turner. All right, so we're going to start with Councillor Townsend, please. Would you like to identify what you've been doing for the past 2 weeks?
Believe it or not, I don't have a lot to say this morning, so.
Fair enough.
Okay, well, carry on.
Councillor Hergert, thank you
Sure.
very much.
Thank you for everyone who participated in the hike for hospice. I do not have a final tally on the amount raised there, but good turnout, and thank you for everybody who donated their time and actually participated. We're hoping to get a Southern Grey or Bruce hospice house. And anyway, thank you for participating. And as the correspondence here notes, the C2, there is a Gulf for Hospice Day coming up at June 18th.
Thank you. Councillor Shea, please.
Yes, I was pleased to be volunteering at the roller skating in Neustadt a couple of weeks ago. I went to a Neustadt Rec Committee meeting, and if you go to the meeting, you volunteer. It's just the way it goes. And it was loads of fun. Tons of people come out for that, and I enjoyed it. There was also the Neustadt Craft Fair, where I saw your worship just a couple of days ago. That was also very rewarding. That's what I have to report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Shea. Deputy Mayor.
Good morning. Actually, quite a bit of stuff was going on with the Newstead Easter egg hunt, and that I think we had that snow that day, but I was out with that. I took my granddaughters to that, and it was quite successful. 24th, we did go to the Chamber, the West Grey Chamber of Commerce AGM. We attended that. The 25th was the West Grey Minor Hockey Banquet, and that was another success story there. I did get out on the 27th, which was our trout opener in the snow. So we were fishing in the snow. We did have our regular gear. We didn't bring our ice rods, but there was a lot of children out at Allen Park and over at Holstein, so it was good to see them catching lots of fish. 28th, I did get over to the St. John's Glen Elg breakfast fundraiser that they had our fill of pancakes and sausage there. So We did the labor force diversification seminar in Newstead. And the 3rd, we were over to the Durham Ag Society roast beef dinner, had our fill of there, and I attended the Forest Creek subdivision ribbon cutting on the 4th. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Tom Hutchinson. I'll now go to Councillor Beth Hamilton, please.
Thank you. It was a really busy weekend. I saw quite a bit of council out and about where I was too, so enjoyed the Durham Agricultural Society evening out supper and the music that night. Great turnout at the Newstead Craft Show. And then later that afternoon, the sun was shining as we did a West Grey clean sweep in my neighborhood with my neighbors. So very thankful for wonderful neighbors who care about our neighborhood. And it's always sad to pick up so much garbage, but thankful to have the help to do so. And enjoyed another sunny day on Sunday for the Hike for Hospice here in Durham. Looking forward to Saugeen Naturalists are hosting a walk this coming Sunday at 1 o'clock, and I know council was invited out for that walk. That's this coming weekend. And we're touring the Saugeen Municipal Airport this weekend too, aren't we? Yeah, really looking forward to that. So another busy week coming up on council.
Thank you. Councillor Hutchinson, please.
Yeah, so just to repeat a couple of events that happened that some of our council was at. On the April 25th, the Saugeen Airport had an economic development session where we met with other local, sorry, I lost my spot here, went with other local municipalities and talked about where we're going in terms of economic development with our airport, and so that's exciting. And we have a new restaurant provider there, so check that out. He sounds quite interesting, comes from the Owen Sound area, but apparently he's well known for his meals, so we're checking out. On May 1st, darn, Peter's giving me problems here. On May 1st, let me just find my spot again. The labor force workshop that was held in Newstead was interesting. That there are a number of local businesses that are struggling to find workers, and they talked about the bringing immigrants in to do the job. Some of them high-skilled workers for farming, some of them general laborers. PSWs were one of the ones that was mentioned, that there's a real shortage. And it was very, very informative. Our Saugeen Connects, which is a group of local municipalities that are working together to promote bringing new people to the area to try to fill some of those positions. So that was an interesting morning. This past weekend, as Councillor Hamilton has mentioned, that there was a clean sweep going on, but that's not the only opportunity you have. So if you want to continue to clean your side road or your area, you need to contact the office, and we have some orange garbage bags that you can leave at the side of the road for pickup by our roads department. So make sure you contact the office because the bags are available for that position or for that job only. And then finally, just a reminder that this weekend is Household Hazardous Waste Day, and so at the arena, I believe it's 10 to 2, we will be collecting household hazardous waste. So take your batteries and your CFL light bulbs and anything else that's old paint, and bring it there, and that'll keep it out of our landfills. So that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. We've been very busy as council, attending a number of openings, ribbon cuttings, events, just community events overall. So I'm very pleased with the activity level of council. I do want to mention that I attended the annual general meeting of the West Grey and District Chamber of Commerce, and I swore in the new executive. Nella Monica Wells is the president. I also attended the meeting and the elections for Durham Legion Branch 308, and Ralph Paler is the president of the Legion. The openings, ribbon cuttings, and just overall events this last 2 weeks was for the Economic Development 101, the West Grey Hockey Banquet, which I quite enjoyed. Deputy, thank you very much. The Forest Creek Estates, which is a fabulous subdivision here in West Grey, as well as the Durham Hike for Hospice. So I was most pleased to be attending all of those events. I also attended the Miniature Horse Club of Ontario Fuzzy Show, and that show was held in West Grey. So I was more than pleased to be in attendance for an equine event. This is Education Week, and I will be reading a couple books to students at the Normanby Community School this Friday. Many, many more events, but it's time to get on with the decision-making of this council. So again, thank you for your participation on behalf of citizens. It's definitely noteworthy. All right, so we're not close to 10:30 at this point. I would suggest that we go right to item 12, staff reports, and start with the Director of Finance and Treasurer. So we do have, as usual, the approval of vouchers. This one happens to be number 9-2019. So at this point, I will ask if there are any questions regarding the vouchers from members of council. Councillor Townsend, please. Thank you.
Yes, on page 4, there's a life insurance premium of $23,795 and a couple of cents. I just wondered, what's the frequency of that payment?
It's every month.
Every month? Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
You're quite welcome. Further questions? Councillor Hamilton, please.
Yes, I have a question on page 96 in the agenda, which would be, sorry, let me just find the page for you. You got it? Okay, thank you. Page 18. The payment for booking, the quarterly payment, have we started using that booking program yet, or how is that going to unroll?
Yeah, we're still just working through finalizing the setup of it, but we haven't done the launch yet for the public to access. But we've done working on behind the scenes, setting up the facilities and all the different parameters that need to be in there for the rates.
For the rates, okay. And will this be an ongoing quarterly payment, or is it, okay, so it's like okay. Okay, thank you.
Further questions, members of council? Councillor Hergert, please.
Just to further Councillor Hamilton's question there, when would we expect this to be available to the public?
Yeah, I'm not sure on the actual launch date yet, but we're definitely want to get it in before the next ice season. But right now with the hall rentals and that, we haven't got it fully set up. So we've got want to do some testing with it. So I don't have an actual launch date yet.
I guess I was hoping maybe they would give you 3 months to get it all set up and a test run before we started paying, but maybe that's not.
Councillor Hutchinson, please.
Yeah, a couple questions. There was, on page 81 of our report, I guess it's page 3 in yours, Carrie, the Town of Hanover High Angle Rescue, 3 hours fire response, $1,800. I can't remember what that was about, and are we reimbursed for that, or that's our payment to them? Is that how that works?
Yeah, so we've used that service. Depending on the incident, it may be billed out to the insurance company involved, depending on the type of incident that was. But that's for their specialized service that we pay that.
Right, so it's possible that we could get reimbursed for that sort of thing. Okay. The other one was a question about Newstead streetlight repairs. I think it was on page 88. There was 5 streetlights repaired for about $1,000. And I'm just wondering, it seems awful soon since we installed our streetlights that we're repairing them. Any idea what that was? Maybe our director would know. I'm not sure, are we replacing bulbs already, or?
I can't answer that right now, Councillor. I'll have to investigate that. I'm not sure if it was fuses or whether it was $1,000. I'm sorry, was it?
It was $992 for 5
It seems
Newstead
awful low for replacing 5 headlight or 5 streetlights.
Yeah.
I would suggest that it would be minor,
Yeah.
meaning the fuses or something that may have been replaced, but I can find out.
Because they have fairly extensive life, those bulbs.
They do,
right?
but I was expecting if we replaced 5 heads, that would have been a much,
Much higher than that.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, I was just curious in that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Further questions or comments? All right, I do have a motion before me, and that is moved by Councillor Hutchinson, seconded by Councillor Hamilton. Be it resolved that the Director of Finance and Treasurer be authorized to pay the accounts presented as voucher number 9-2019 in the amount of $762,181.77 of the Municipality of West Grey. Questions? Calling the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? It does carry. Director Mighton, you have another item, and this is dealing with the Town of Minto Support Resolution Re Provincial OMPF Review. Any comments?
Yeah, so the Minto's looking, has circulated it for support for their motion, and we know when we were doing our budget deliberations that it's a critical area that we want to make sure that the province doesn't drastically change the envelope of it, or it will impact our ratepayers significantly.
Thank you for that update. Questions, comments? I do have a motion before me, moved by Deputy Mayor Tom Hutchinson, seconded by Councillor Rebecca Herger. Be it resolved that the Council of the Municipality of West Grey hereby supports the resolution from the Town of Minto expressing concern over the potential reduction and/or loss of OMPF allotment in future years and urging the province to complete the OMPF review in an expeditious manner. And further, that this resolution be circulated to the Premier, Ministers of Finance, Municipal Affairs and Housing, and our local MPP. Questions? Yes, Councillor Herger.
I was just curious, will this be circulated throughout Grey County as well? I know that, we are affected this year in a reduction of this funding, but it does apply to every municipality and the concern for next year's budget. So I see that they're circulating to some people, to some groups and organizations. Will it also be circulated throughout Grey County?
So I'm going to suggest when a council determines that they're going to circulate a specific resolution, that they fan out to various municipalities. So the question would be, perhaps the clerk knows the breadth of circulation for the initial request from the Town of Minto. Do you have any idea at this point?
I'm assuming the Town of Minto circulated all Ontario municipalities. That comes at a fairly hefty cost. If this council wishes to circulate to local Grey County and Grey County itself, that could be added to the resolution as a friendly amendment.
Mm-hmm. So you would
Yes,
like a friendly
please.
amendment, and that is circulated to Grey County municipalities?
Yes, please.
Okay. The mover and seconder, are you fine with that? That would be you, Deputy Mayor. And Councillor Herger, yes, thank you all. Okay, so I've added all Grey County municipalities for the circulation. Does anybody need me to read the motion again? All right, calling the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Does carry. Thank you for that. All right, that completes the staff report from our Director of Finance and Treasurer. We've got 5 minutes. I'm going to suggest that we move on to the clerk's report. Clerk Turner, your sole item is in regards to the Township of Tudor and Cashel. Would you like to speak to that, please?
Yes, similar to the Minto one, I assume this was sent to all Ontario municipalities and as well as a number of agencies. Yes, it was in fact sent to all municipalities.
Okay.
Just seeking council direction. I believe there have been some previous resolutions similar to this. If council wishes to entertain a resolution, I do have one.
Thank you. Questions or comments, starting with Councillor Townsend, please.
Yeah, it's funny, I notice that the more and more that the unit rate, the kilowatt unit rate gets legislated and controlled, it's not uncommon to use the practice many other companies use, and you shift it to another category, but you still end up with the same revenue, and I suspect that's what Hydro doing. So I would definitely support a resolution being put forward. So.
Okay, very good. So I will pass that down to you, Councillor. Okay. Any other comments or questions? All right, we'll just wait for the motion to return to me. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So the motion is moved by Councillor Townsend, seconded by Councillor Herger. Be it resolved that the Council of the Municipality of West Grey supports a resolution of the Township of Tudor Cashel Council requesting Hydro One and Ontario Energy Board to review its plans regarding delivery service to ensure that the cost of service delivery is fair to everyone. And further, that a supporting letter be forwarded to the Premier of Ontario, Hydro One, the Ontario Energy Board, Association of Municipalities of Ontario, local MPPs, and the Township of Tudor-Cashel. Questions? Calling the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? It does carry. Clerk Turner, that is the last item on your report, the first and only item. What's? Certainly. That is fantastic. I was just, it's as if you read my mind. We do have a few minutes before our delegations begin. So Clerk Turner is suggesting that we deal with bylaws in a most efficient manner. So we are on proposed bylaws, first, second, and third reading, beginning with proposed bylaw 33-2019. This is the first one? All right, members of council, I have the first motion before me, moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor Hutchinson. Be it resolved that bylaw number 33-2019, being a bylaw to establish a policy setting out required financial securities for inclusion in subdivision agreements, be now read a first, second, and third time, passed and numbered, and that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Questions? Calling the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? It does carry. Bylaw 34-2019, moved by Councillor Shea, seconded by Deputy Mayor Hutchinson. Be it resolved that bylaw number 34-2019, being a bylaw to appoint fence viewers, be now read a first, second, and third time, passed and numbered, and that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Questions? Okay. Councillor Townsend, I do have a comment first from our clerk. Clerk Turner, please.
So just for your information, the Line Fences Act is one of the oldest acts in the province. In fact, when I was reading the 1880, 1890 minutes from Normanby for another matter, I saw a number of references to this same act and getting fence viewers to attend. So where this comes into play is if a property owner wishes to have a new fence or to reconstruct a fence, the initial procedure is they talk to the neighbor, and if they come to an agreement in terms of constructing the new fence or reconstructing it, then they proceed. If, however, there is no agreement, there is the availability of a property owner to request the attendance of fence viewers to attend the site, and then they will hear from both parties, and they will make an award. Basically, it's a decision as to who will construct the fence, what type of fence it'll be, the height of the fence, etc. And that's what's happening. Our last fence viewing was in 2013. The last fence viewers appointments bylaw was in 2009. Right now, I did update and discuss that with the current appointees. And of the 5 that we had, there's only 3 now that wish to continue. And there is a minimum of 3 fence viewers that need to attend at a fence viewing. So after this, I will be going out for an ad for additional fence viewers as well. So in fact, we do have a fence viewing likely later in May, and I'm actually sending out notice as early as tomorrow on that. So that's a bit of a background, and that's why we are just confirming the appointment of the 3 now, and just confirming again the remuneration.
Thank you for that update, Clerk Turner. Councillor Townsend, please.
Thank you. That was exactly my question. I had no clue
Yeah, I
what
thought
they
so.
were actually going to do. Stand at the road and just view them or what? But anyway, thank you. Appreciate the clarification.
Interesting comment. Any further questions? Councillor Hamilton, please.
Yes, thank you for that history lesson. I noticed in Blue Mountains they have this as a committee of council. Can you speak, Clerk Turner, to the difference between a committee of council and this structure? How that would be different?
Yeah, I'm not aware of that. Typically, when I read the Line Fences Act and the guide itself that's put out by the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, it does really indicate the council shouldn't be part of this decision-making. There are other municipalities that have an actual signed bylaw that may supersede the Fences Act, which can be placed in lieu of, so that may be something that Blue Mountains has, but yeah, reading the Fence Viewer's Guide as recently as last night, it just reinforced that it becomes a quasi-judicial procedure, and that's why council has this, usually remains apart from it, because there's an appeal mechanism as well. If one of the parties isn't satisfied with the award, it would go to the province, and then what's called a line fences referee will hold a hearing, would be here at the office, and they would hear both parties and make a decision as well. So it's been through a couple of those actually, but thankfully there hasn't been too many.
Please go ahead.
So, and then just also wondering, I heard you say you're going to re-advertise or advertise this for more members. Could we advertise it and then put together this bylaw so that we are capturing all the applicants, so that's a fair, open, transparent call for applicants?
I do need these 3 appointed and just the remuneration confirmed today, because they will be meeting, as I say, later this month. So I envision, yes, when the ad goes out, I'm hoping there'll be at least 2 or 3 more individuals that could be appointed, and we would just amend that bylaw accordingly. But time is of the essence, unfortunately, and
Fair enough.
if council would be willing to pass this would help facilitate that line fence viewing.
Okay. Further questions or comments? All right, I have read the motion, calling the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? It does carry. Okay. So that was bylaw 34. We are now on proposed bylaw 35, moved by Councillor Hutchinson, seconded by Councillor Hamilton. Be it resolved that bylaw number 35-2019, being a bylaw to appoint a building inspector for the municipality of West Grey, Mary Schofield, be now read a first, second, and third time, passed and numbered, and that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Questions, members of council? All right, calling the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? It carries. Clerk Turner, we do have just the confirming bylaw. Can I proceed with the passage of that, or do you want me to wait till the very end of the meeting? All right, thanks for the clarification. Moved by Councillor Townsend, seconded by Councillor Hergert. Be it resolved that the bylaw number 36-2019, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the May 7th, 2019 council meeting, be now read a first, second, and third time, passed and numbered, and that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. I'm sure there are no questions on this, but looking for questions. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? It does carry. All right, so that takes us right back to delegations, members of council. And our first delegation is here. Welcome and hello. It's Paul Arnell regarding trespassing concerns on his property, which is 255 South Street East in Durham. Would you mind going to the podium, please? Oh, the podium is just at the back at the entrance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
You're welcome.
Where are the owners of the property that's exposed?
Oh, Paul? Sorry to interrupt. Are you just able to press the button? It's the gray or blue button just over to the right.
That's it. Is that better?
Appreciate it, yes.
All right. Anyway, we're the owners of the property in the south-east corner of Durham, formerly known as Durham Stone and Paving. It is a licensed gravel pit. Through the property, when it was relicensed about 20 years ago, we created a road allowance through there and gave it to the town for, I think, $1 to create 2 separate lots. The intent of it was that this would be used after the pit was depleted and not used anymore. Subsequent to that time, snowmobilers were going through there, and we really didn't have much issue with the snowmobilers, but the previous council decided to allow dirt bikes in there and four-wheelers, and we have an impossible situation here, which I am in complete disagreement with the former council on because of the issues of liability. You simply cannot allow 16-year-olds on dirt bikes to run around an active gravel pit. It's a terrible situation. And we would like to ask the council to recognize this and to close that road allowance until further notice. Now, we don't mind snowmobilers going through there. They're pretty good, and they know where they're supposed to be, and they don't throw out beer cans and make a mess. But we have a terrible issue in the summertime when we are operating and allowing this situation. Now, I have several copies. Blake, can you take those to the front? Of the Aggregate Resources Act, which clearly states, and on the highlighted page, where the green is, in the event this act, this is the Aggregate Resources Act of Ontario, regarding licensed gravel pits, which we're talking about. In the event this act and the regulations in a municipal bylaw, official plan, or development agreement treat the same subject matter in different ways, this act and the regulations prevail, and the bylaw, official plan, or development agreement is inoperative to the extent that it differs with this act and the regulations. Which basically means if the town wants to allow dirt bikes in there, and the Aggregate Act clearly states that it's supposed to be fenced and people staying out of there, the Aggregate Act wins. And it's only common sense, it really is. So we would ask that the municipality reconsider their position on allowing this roadway to be used in that manner. For years, I've said if anybody wants to walk their dog in the property on a Saturday or a Sunday when we're not operating, officially you can't do it, unofficially you can, I don't mind. But the issue we're having with these motorcycles and four-wheelers back in there is just a terrible situation, and both of us are looking for liability we really don't need. Any questions?
Well, I appreciate, Mr. Arnell, that you brought this to the new council's attention very much. I'm going to suggest, I will take questions, obviously, from members of council, but I would ask that this be dealt with by a few of our staff members, and that would include our Director of Infrastructure and Public Works, our Chief Administrative Officer, I see involved in this as well as our clerk for the legislative requirements. So that's what I'm looking for from this council, that it be referred back to staff to be addressed, and then to connect with you on it. Obviously, it'll be something that we'll see back on council. I do look forward to the comments from Councillor Hutchinson, who was on the previous council. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. One of my questions would be, I think we had this discussion previously, since it is a road allowance, I believe the discussion was around fencing, and that there needed to be fencing on both sides of that road allowance, so that way we wouldn't get trespassing because we'd have fences on both sides. So where has that gone? Because I think we did have that discussion, I believe.
Well, my requirements under the Pits and Quarries Act are that I fence the property in its entirety, like around the perimeter. And the road allowance within that is part of my licensed area. The council, when we licensed it and gave them the road allowance, I have a redevelopment plan that says, okay, I'm supposed to take out gravel to this level and restore it, which the previous council at that time, which would be, 20 years ago or so, agreed to that. Now, I can't fence that area in there and take out the gravel at the same time. And I'm not required to do that under my Aggregate Act. I'm required to fence both areas and basically keep the public out of there for safety reasons.
So you are taking gravel out of that pit now, then?
Occasionally, yeah. Not all the time, but we are occasionally, yeah.
Okay.
No, it's not very active. Like, and I think that's part of the issue. Like, if we were running there every day, everybody would clearly see that this isn't a good situation. But we're not running every day. And when I spoke to the senior Ministry of Natural Resources people who look after the aggregate section, they basically said, when we had this disagreement with the previous council, make a deal with the council. Like, it's a gray area here, and make a deal. So the deal I'm basically offering is, look, if you want snowmobilers in the wintertime there to come in and be able to buy gasoline or restaurants or go to Tim Hortons or whatever they want, that's really not a problem. But in the summertime when we are operating, I really don't want people in there.
Yeah, fair enough. Further questions or comments? Councillor Townsend, please.
Yeah, a question for staff, actually, and that has to do with, if we take away the road allowance, does that really solve the problem? Meaning it's still going to be a path, it's still going to be accessible, and so I'm wondering, is that the right action, or is there something else that should be done?
Yeah, and I think that's so noted, and I think that can be addressed when we have the report back, so that there's enough information provided, and also further discussion with Mr. Arnell. So thank you for that. Further questions or comments? Councillor Hamilton.
In that staff report, could we include the ATV bylaw where it does list the roads that they are permitted? So, because one of my questions is, are they actually permitted on this road allowance or not? I know
Great
there's a
idea.
list. Thank you.
Yep, very good. Further? All right, good. Well, thank you, Mr. Arnell, for coming forward. Let's see if we could get this resolved. So the action, based on your delegation to us today, is that we're asking staff to provide a report with regard to the issues and concerns. I know that our staff will connect further with you, and that the report will be brought back to council, so you will have notification of the actual meeting that it will occur at.
Thank you very much.
You're quite welcome. Thank you for your
Do you want me
delegation.
to turn this off?
Yes, please. All right. All right. Bye now. All right. Members of council, I do not see our next three delegations at this time. We are just a minute short of the next delegation time anyway. Clerk Turner, I wonder if I could just proceed. Do you have any issues if I move my way towards item 14, or what would you suggest? Oh, well, it's nice that we have a little bit of dialogue. That, I think, may be Greg Pringley. That's me. That's great. Well, welcome, and your timing could not be better, I must say. Very good. So as you get settled, just want to say welcome, and I will call you to the podium. Greg Pringley. Thank you. Project Manager, Viola Water Canada. This is going to be an overview of the West Grade Drinking Water Quality Management System. All right, thank you.
Will it be showing up over here that I'll be able to...
Director?
Ask Mark for his assistance.
All right. Yes, I believe there will be some information, so we'll allow the time for setup. Thank you. Certainly. So I'm going to call a 5-minute break to permit the technical portion of our council meeting to take place. Thank you. All right, members of council, thank you for that quick break. So we are back with our second delegation, Greg Pringley, Project Manager for Viola Water Canada. This will be an overview of the West Grade Drinking Water Quality Management System. Welcome, and please proceed.
Thank you. Good. Yes, so my name is Greg Pringley. I'm the project manager for Veolia Water Canada. I oversee a number of projects in Ontario, including the ones here in West Grey for Durham and Newstead. I'm just going to take a little bit of time to quickly go over the management system that we have in place for the Durham and Newstead drinking water systems. Just as a quick little background, this all began back as a result of what happened in Walkerton. Well, 10 or 15 years ago now, and it was ruled that we now needed to have a quality management system in place that met a certain number of requirements, and one of those requirements is to get an endorsement from council for the quality management standard that the operating authority has put into place. So now that there's a new council, we require a new endorsement. We went through this process probably 4 years or so ago with the previous council, got an endorsement. We put that in on our plan, so when it's audited, we're meeting the requirements of that particular element. So in the standard itself, there's 21 elements. I'm not going to go through them all because they don't all pertain to what you guys are concerned about. But there's a quick list, establishing a policy just that basically says, this is what our standard does. Again, the one that we're here for today, the commitment and endorsement by owner and top management. So top management is on Veolia's side. So we get endorsement from the ownership side and we get an endorsement from the operating authority side. Establish a quality management representative, that's myself. documents and record control, describing the drinking water system, undertaking a risk assessment, which basically means we go through the entire system from where the water comes out of the ground to, when it ends up in the final house and everything in between, and other things as well, making sure that we rate the hazards based on, how likely they are to happen, how severe, it is if something was to happen. And we just give it a score, and then based on the score, it's like, okay, this is a high priority item, moderate, low, and whatnot. Organizational structure, just making sure that that's clear. That's something we'll go over in a couple of slides that basically indicate, okay, here's the roles and responsibilities of the operating authority. Here's the roles and responsibilities of the owner. Yes, we're contracted by the Municipality of West Grey to oversee the drinking water systems and the sewage systems here in Durham, but that doesn't absolve council or the owner of saying, oh, this isn't our problem. You ultimately are the owners of this system. Competencies, making sure that that staff maintain a certain amount of competency to be able to run the system. Procedure to ensure coverage of the facility, making sure that it's a 24/7 job. We need to make sure that it's being covered that way. Communication, identifying essential supplies and services. So making sure that we have a primary and secondary supplier, whether it be for chemicals or computer issues or anything that you can think of. We need to make sure, lab services, those sorts of things, to make sure that we have coverage. And if for some reason that initial primary supplier was to fall by the wayside for whatever reason, we have a backup. Reviewing infrastructure, sampling and monitoring of the drinking water, making sure that the equipment works properly, that you have it calibrated by third parties, you maintain it yourself depending on what the equipment is, and then going through infrastructure maintenance, rehabilitation, and renewal. And the last few there, emergency management. So what happens if something goes wrong, there's an alarm, there's a major weather storm that affects the plant somehow, the power goes out, all sorts of different things for emergency management. Internal auditing, so making sure that we have somebody that comes in and conducts an audit on our quality management system, because the process is such that we as Veolia maintain it throughout the year, but on an annual basis we have somebody come in and audit the system kind of on our behalf internally, and then also on an annual basis an external auditor comes in to make sure, and basically that's where we get our accreditation. It's the company that we use currently is called NSF, and they basically give you the thumbs up or thumbs down on how your system is performing. And then continual improvement. We're now well into this system now. We've been doing it for a decade, and now it's about how are we continuing to make improvements to make the system better. Is it upgrading equipment? Is it monitoring this, that? So that's the final element 21 in the standard. So jumping into the responsibilities, I believe that was element 6 maybe, for the owner. And this is where, again, it pertains to the people sitting here as a whole. Applying for license and drinking water works permit. So there's the new system, the way it is now, there's a drinking water license and a drinking water works permit. They share some of the same information, but basically they just describe, here's your system, this is what you need to do, this is what you need to maintain, here's how it's all laid out. Again, you don't need to know the nuts and bolts, but that's what it is. Again, endorsing the operational plan, that's why we're here. Submitting the operational plan to, well, this still says MOE, but they're on their third name change by now. And again, that's been done. That you needed to do that at the very beginning to get the license and the permit in the first place. Ultimately, although we developed it, the owner owns the operational plan. Ensuring the operating authority is accredited. Obviously, you have a drinking water system, you need your operating authority to have accreditation. We have it. We have a certificate that says we have it, and we get that renewed and reviewed, like I said, either on an annual basis. The cycle for accreditation is every 3 years. So we have a 2-year period where they'll do an off-site audit, and then every 3rd year they come on-site, and then you renew your certificate and those sorts of things. So we're up to date. We're doing everything we need to do. Monitoring the QMS and the need for resources to support it. Again, we're fairly self-sufficient. We don't come to council to say, well, we need this for the QMS or that. I mean, we're well into this, and we know what we need, and we're able to get those resources internally. Ensuring compliance with license. And then just this just indicates kind of what we as the operating authority have to follow and what responsibilities that we have. Preparing the plan, again, same as you, endorsing the plan, submitting the operational plan to the accreditation body. So where council or the owner submits it to the regulator, the MECP they're called now, the ministry, we submit it to the accreditation body. We're ultimately the ones who need to become accredited. We implement the QMS, we obtain the accreditation, we communicate with the owner on the QMS and resource requirements. Typically that communication happens between Brent Glazier and myself, and then ensuring compliance with the licenses, making sure we're operating the systems the way that we're supposed to. The owner roles, I just kind of summarized, pulled the pieces out of the various elements that apply to the owner. The QMS policy, just making sure that the operating authority is demonstrating certain commitments. Element 3, the commitment and endorsement, again, what we're trying to obtain here. Element 9, the organizational structure, lists out the owner roles and responsibilities that we've kind of gone over already. Element 12 is communications, how we go about, how do we communicate to you, how do you communicate to the end user, those sorts of things. Elements 14 and 15 have to do with infrastructure. How is your infrastructure reviewed, maintained, and renewed? How do you make sure that you've got a cycle where you know what the lifespan is for this equipment, and how do we make sure that there's money in the budget or whatever to replace pumps or underground infrastructure, whatever the case is. Element 18, emergency management. Again, when we get an alarm at the system, it's not like it's up to anybody here to do anything about that, but in a larger role, say, like I said before, a major weather catastrophe, I mean, what emergency plans are in place here, even with the municipality, to say this is where we would go to get a water truck, those sorts of different things, or where would we go to get a backup generator to plug in at this facility, or something along those lines. And then the management review, that's basically where I go over with my upper management, review a number of questions relating to some of these elements. Some kind of fall a little bit outside the elements, but to make sure that my upper management's on the same page with what's going on here, where he's aware of any problems that the system has maybe had in the past. But then we communicate the minutes of those meetings to the municipality to make sure, okay, we met this requirement, because it's an annual requirement as well to do this management review. So we, pass those minutes along and say, look, and summarize, these are the findings, we need to get this done, corrective actions, that sort of thing. I spoke earlier about the QMS policy. I'm not going to go through it, word for word here. You can see the bullets. Again, together the municipality of West Grey and Veolia are committed to managing and operating the drinking water systems responsibly, providing the customer with clean, safe drinking water, maintaining and continually improving the quality management systems, and complying with regulations and legislation. So we have this policy up at both of the drinking water systems. It's something that the operators go in there and see every day. They're well versed in the QMS and what's required, and understand the general basis of what this is and what they need to do. It doesn't change what they do on a day-to-day basis. They're still working in the municipality's best interest to provide all the residents with clean, safe drinking water. But there's obviously a lot of legislation and red tape behind all of that. I spoke a little bit about the risk assessment. Again, just so that we are looking at the various hazards, low or high, within the system itself. Like I said before, we're ranking it by category based on how likely it could happen, how severe it is, and then how detectable it is. Is it alarmed? Is it something that the operator might just see on their daily rounds? Those sorts of things. And then basically, if the score is high enough, it's considered to be a critical control point where we have a specific individual procedure for that. So in West Grey, it basically relates to disinfection. Obviously, the disinfection of the drinking water is the most important thing. We need to make sure that that water going out the door from the plant is disinfected properly, such that not only is it fully disinfected for that first user, but also that very last user. Because down, as the water goes down the pipe, it loses some of that disinfection. People are using the water, it's sitting, it's collecting whatever it's gunk that has built up in those pipes over decades of time. But yeah, that all pulls a little bit of chlorine out of that water, but there's still lots of disinfection at the very end, and we need to make sure that that gets maintained. And then again, there's that review of degree of control that can be applied. There's certain things that we have a lot of control over, and there's certain things that we don't have very much control over at all. So like I said, the disinfection, you have good redundancy. There's backup pumps for chlorine. There's multiple wells in the system to make sure if you have a problem with one, the water coming out of one building, one area, you have, a second backup well. You have alarm set points where, you're not putting your alarm at the very minimum level, because as soon as you have that alarm, well, now you're going to be out of compliance. It's going to be an adverse. You have your set point set up higher that gives you the opportunity to respond, put a corrective action in place, stop the water until, okay, we got everything fixed. Now we can, keep going, and we don't have to report anything. It's all working the way it's supposed to. Automatic shutdowns in the system if you get an alarm, if the chlorine is low, if the UV lights aren't providing enough intensity, the system will automatically shut down. And then again, there's the tower, there's the reservoir that provide water in the meantime. You say, oh, the water shuts down, what happens? Well, there's already, disinfected water in place that can be used for, potentially, if not, multiple hours, or it can be multiple days, just depending on the usage. And again, this, like I said before, it also covers the chlorine residual in the distribution system, which is the pipes leading to all the homes after it leaves the facilities. So basically, again, in the organizational structure there in element 9, we just go over what the role of the owner and the operating authority is. Again, we basically went through those, but just quickly for the owner, again, overseeing that the public is getting clean, safe drinking water, that they're properly operated, that we're meeting the requirements of the contract even that we have between Veolia and West Grey. You're the representative for the drinking water system to the public, providing resources as necessary. We talked about that. And again, endorsing the plan. We keep coming back to endorsing the plan. We need to have council, the owner, on board with, with what we're doing. Element 12, again, communicating with the owner. The management review that I spoke about, Brent and I have meetings going over quarterly operations reports that we provide that don't specifically, aren't specifically about the drinking water quality management system, but we do touch on various aspects. I mean, everything that we do relates to the drinking water system and the QMS in some way, maybe not directly, but it can be indirectly. Again, making sure that we have communication with our suppliers. The suppliers need to know that the equipment that they need to use, the parts and whatnot, are allowed to be used in a drinking water system. You can't necessarily go to Home Hardware and pick up all the pieces you need, because if they're not designated as safe for use in drinking water because they contain lead or something like that, that you can't use them. So we have to use, unfortunately at times, we have to use suppliers who specialize in specific equipment for drinking water systems. That costs a little more, but again, you're meeting the requirements for the system. Communicating with the consumers, accepting complaints or inquiries from the public. We provide compliance reports to make, those are public. That meets requirements annually for the ministry, but then those are public documents that anybody, any resident is allowed to see. Helping with the notification to the owners with a system, emergencies, alerts, Press releases would be issued by the owner, public documents being made available. And again, there's a list of public documents that need to be made available, and we've worked with the municipality in the past in making sure that you have those documents, all the lab reports that come from our accredited lab that we are required to take. They all are available here. They get sent directly to Joyce, and they're available for anybody to see. And again, public information being posted as required. Again, the emergency management element we just spoke about earlier. This gives a little bit more detail on the types of conditions that are in our contingency plan. We kind of use that phrase, these two phrases interchangeably: emergency management, contingency plans. Again, what we do if we have an adverse water quality incident, major power failure, those sorts of things. And what do we do? Do we who's supposed to respond? Who do we contact? Those sorts of things. Other items included in the emergency procedure, the element says these are the sorts of things that you need to have, that you need to cover in your plan. And so, what kind of response and recovery do we have? What kind of training and testing do we do with our staff to make sure that they're ready to respond in an emergency? What sort of responsibilities are delegated to the owner and to the operating authority in case of an emergency? Again, referring to any sort of municipal emergency plans in addition to the ones that we have for our own system. And communication protocol. And just a note there at the bottom, does the municipality have an emergency plan that includes the drinking water system? That's just something to be aware of. Do we have something that's current? Proper contact information, proper for us or for the various vendors out there that we would require help from. Finishing up. Internal auditing, again, like I said, it's done once per calendar year. The most recent audit was done in January 2018. The standard recently shifted from every 12 months that you needed to do these to every calendar year. January was a kind of a rough time to have it, so we've moved it to Q2. So we'll be having our internal audit quite shortly, actually. But again, the last audit we had, again, you can either have opportunities for improvement or non-conformances. And a non-conformance is basically the equivalent of a non-compliance from the Ministry of the Environment. It's different terminology, but it means kind of the same thing. Whereas an opportunity for improvement is, okay, you're following all the rules, you're following the standards, but here's something you could do to maybe make it a little bit better. The internal auditor is working on your behalf to try to make your system better, so that when you have the external auditor come in, they're the ones who are going through it and making sure you're doing what you're supposed to do. And you hope that the internal audit that you had got you prepared for that, where you're passing the external audits with flying colors. And our last several external audits have been great. We haven't had any non-conformances. At most, we may have had one or two opportunities for improvement. And again, that's sometimes just the opinion of the auditor. We may follow through with that recommendation. We may not, just depending on what it is. Management review, like I spoke before, there are several things we need to cover when I review with my upper management, and then pass along to the municipality. And there's a list there, basically a summary from the last meeting to the current meeting, that, okay, what did we have for non-compliances, adverses, deviations from our critical controls that we talked about, how is the risk assessment process working, what were the results of the different audits, results of emergency response testing, just in general, how is the system performing. The trends of the drinking water. What sort of things are we finding in the drinking water that that may be cause for concern? Are we finding an elevated level of pesticides? Things like that. We don't have that problem. Just so you can be rest assured. But those are the sorts of things that we look at. We'll create all kinds of graphs to look at and make sure that things are trending the way they're supposed to be. Following up on action items. looking ahead to any changes that could affect the QMS. Are we changing a system? Are we installing a new well? Those sorts of things. And when those sorts of big things happen, we make sure that we reassess the system, the risks, and make sure that nothing changes. All the changes we make, we want them to make the system better, not, give us more headaches. Consumer feedback, like we spoke before, resources, any sort of infrastructure review that gets done, making sure that the operational plan is current, when was it last reviewed, and any sort of staff suggestions. I mean, that's a big part of it, right? The staff are the ones who are on the front lines, and they see what's working, what's not working. They have ample opportunities to come to me, come to Brent, voice their concerns. We think we need this, we think this needs to be improved, those sorts of things. Oh, and I guess that's it.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Prangley. We very much appreciate your presentation. A lot of information for us. I have a question and a comment, and the question deals around the commitment and the endorsement timeframe for the drinking water quality management standard for the Neustadt and Durham water systems. In terms of a timeframe, what specifically are you looking at for this council to make a determination on the endorsement of the operational plan?
There's no specific timeline.
Okay.
Again, as long as the auditors see that, look, okay, we're making an effort. We've made this presentation. Council now has an opportunity to review and provide an endorsement. I mean, whether it's next week or next month, that's okay. It's just a matter of it needs to be endorsed by the current council, and the auditors need to see that is in progress.
Great, and I do appreciate the time frame not being on an urgent matter at this point, which is very good. So my comment then is, I'm wondering if council would consider having Mr. Prangley come out at a committee of the whole meeting for more of a discussion, so that we understand what from our perspective, what is the operational plan? What does that actually mean as elected officials? Do we understand the trends of water, the full commitment and endorsement, and then if we just look at what's being reviewed annually in terms of the operational plan, just other items, consumer feedback. So if we get an idea of what's happened to date, to give us more of an appreciation of our two water systems. Anyway, food for thought on that. I'm now taking questions from members of council. Councillor Shea, please.
I have questions, but if you're going to suggest that we take this to a committee of the whole, I'll hold my questions until then.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's worthwhile. This was a fantastic presentation, and thank you very much, Mr. Prangley. But I think we've got more work to do, more understanding. This is part of our core service. We've got two water systems within our municipality. We take it very serious, and I would very much like our council to have more of an understanding and an education. So, yeah, I would very much like this to come forward at a committee of the whole meeting. Councillor Hamilton, please. Thank you, Councillor Shea.
Thank you, Mayor Robinson.
Yep.
I have a question. As council, we went through emergency training at the Grey County level. When can we expect to be doing a more West Grey specific emergency training lens?
As I'm going to defer to our CAO, but I can tell you that is definitely in the works for training. Training does need to occur annually. That is a compliance. It's not only a compliance for education, but it is something legislatively that we need to do. So that is in the works. I always enjoy those trainings and feel much, much more confident and have the understanding of what is taking place or potentially could take place in understanding our individual roles. So good question, good connect with this. Okay. Oh, yes, Madam CAO, could you provide a more comprehensive answer?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Not really. That's actually exactly what I would say. I would like to add, however, that the emergency management handbook has gone through an extensive overhaul, and that's just being finalized now. So we're expecting we need a few more weeks, probably another month or two, and then the fire chief and I are going to coordinate a fall exercise.
Very good. Councillor Townsend, please.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It gave an excellent view of what we should be doing and what we need to be doing. The interesting part is when I got to the last management review, I couldn't exactly match the operational plan to that specifically, there are some gaps in that as well. And so I was hoping we would have some time, but that's one of the focuses I know I'll be looking at, because if you can't link what's in the operational plan to the action that you're going to ask us to endorse, then we need to make sure we do close that to be able to endorse it. The Director of Public Works and Infrastructure has come in and given us some updates on what's happened, you know, throughout the year. And we haven't been in office that long, so it hasn't been a lot. But at least we're beginning to get that feeling. But if we can kind of do that on an ongoing basis so it matches the requirements, it'll be easier to make that decision going forward. So
Very
just
good.
throw that out for what it's worth.
Very good, thank you. Further? All right. Well, I think we'll, it sounds like I've got a consensus for a future meeting. I think it's really important, so we will get that organized, and we'll look forward to having you come out to a committee of the whole meeting. Thank you very much for your presentation. But before we leave this delegation, I just want to double check. Members of council, would you wait for the commitment and endorsement after the we have more of an understanding and have the meeting at Committee of the Whole, and then I think we'll be more in a position to understand what that in totality means. Okay? All right, we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for your delegation. All right, we're moving on to our third delegation, which is Heather Wright and Ralph and Donna Clark. This is in regards to the Friends of Music in the Park regarding proposed Sunday evening summer concerts at Vickers Park. Welcome. It's just a matter of turning the button on for the podium. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I'm here with my younger sister, Heather Wright,
Very good.
and we represent a group that we've called Friends of Vickers Park, because it really sounds sweet. Anyway, in 2012, as a part of the homecoming fundraising, Norm Marshall suggested we might do a music concert series. So we put it together, and it's evolved since, and basically our goal was to provide a place for local musicians to play and to provide some entertainment for Sunday nights in Durham, because to be quite frank, there isn't much happening. Anyway, we did that, and it evolved, and we worked with the musicians, and once they locked in, they want to be back every year. It's great. It's payback to the community. And what we typically did was to pass the hat with the idea that nobody needs to put a nickel in. We split the take 50-50 between our committee and the musicians who were playing that particular weekend. Heather will probably have some facts and figures about that, but we took our part of the money and put up picnic tables in the various sites that Steve Earhart guided us on, and he made sure that we picked the right kind of picnic tables too. Anyway, with that in mind, typically how it worked, each year we would contact council, ask them to turn on the power, give us permission to use Vickers, and cover us with insurance. So we were a little bit surprised this year, not knowing exactly what's going on. New council, obviously. We were a little bit surprised when it was like, well, we're going to think about that, because there are 50 to 80 people every Sunday night who count on this. I'll let Heather come on, but I just wanted to share this. I'm not sure if anyone on council has received muffins, because you're doing a great job as councillors. But anyway, this happened to Heather and Steve last summer. I'll share it with them. I think it's cute. There are some people, there are many people, seniors, people who have mobility issues. They come in with their motorized wheelchairs and so on. One of those people showed up at Heather and Steve's front door last summer sometime with a box of muffins to say thank you. So, with that in mind. You want me to say a few things? Yeah, go ahead.
So before we had our music in the park, we have some beautiful parks, but they weren't really being used. And so our little kind of idea is to promote the parks along the waterways. And so we put a little money too into the trails because clearly being raised in Durham, we know that our waterway is our biggest asset in Durham. And the more we can kind of get people enjoying that area, the better, you know, it is for everyone. Certainly before music in the park, nobody ever sat at Vickers Park, other than maybe a few smokers would sit in the gazebo. But now you'll see people actually going down there, having their lunch and you know, really enjoying the park atmosphere. It also promotes the local musicians. It lets everyone know what's available to them. We've had a good variety. We have, usually our first night out, we have the Durham Marching Band. We've had students from 2 music schools in Durham. So we try to provide for the younger people too. There's a lot of people with, as Ralph said, mobility issues. So we haven't promoted. We've got to where we are with our crowd. One reason we haven't promoted, we could do more posters and promote more, but Vickers Park is not very big. So we're kind of at our max for our crowd there. However, there are people already on the phone asking us when it's starting, and so we kind of are here to ask council if there would be any way we could have permission to run it again.
Well, thank you very much for your delegation. I must say, I think it's a wonderful event held every Sunday. It's lovely to see activity in the park and to celebrate our local musicians and just to listen to some lovely music. So thank you for all you've done for this initiative. Now, before I take questions from our members of council for your delegation, Stephanie Stewart, who is our manager, community services. I wonder, manager, would you be able just to give us an update? I know you've been dialoguing with Heather Wright and Ralph Clark, and probably even Donna Clark, with regard to the questions that council had at their last committee of the whole. It was talking about location and continuation of being a committee of council, which I think is quite a lovely approach. But I wonder if you could provide a response to those questions that council did have.
Thank you, Mayor Robinson.
You're welcome.
I have spoken with Heather Wright in regards to this matter, so I would suggest to council that we allow them to continue on as previous years, giving them the acknowledgement that in the future it will look a little bit different, what model they'll need to fall under. However, as it is late notice for them, we suggest that they can continue on as per usual, becoming a committee of council, and then looking to change that out moving forward. We've also talked about the location because there's some concerns regarding the construction and the construction zone. So Heather and I have spoken about that. We're currently looking at an alternative location. The issue with Riverside Park, which was the first one that we suggested, which Councillor Hutchinson has also pointed out, is that there is no power. So I know Steve Earhart is looking into it for some power. So if we can get power, then they would be able to use that location, but until then, we're still looking to find an alternative location. Heather has suggested that we would need some sort of structure of some kind, but the committee is looking forward to supporting that and finding ways to work with us on making it all work.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Ralph Clark.
Well, I just might comment then.
Yes.
The issue that we would have if we were going to go to a different site is you really have to provide cover for the musicians. You just have to do it. Because partway through the show, the rain starts raining, right? And they could continue, even though the audience will run for their cars. But you have that issue. If we were to go behind we're talking behind the credit union, I assume, Doug. If you had some kind of a 20 by 8 foot tent, like overhead, which is something that
I think we could.
We've talked about doing that ourselves. The problem would be issues with security, because it's certainly not something that we'd be putting up every week and taking back down again. That would be the major problem.
Yeah.
And if I had been able to get more community support, then we'd have that portable stage, but we don't.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Hutchinson, please.
Yeah, so if I can just add my thoughts on this, because I am on the BIA, the Durham BIA, and as part of that, we run the Arts Festival. And so we've been discussing this very issue. Yes, we have a quote for hydro, and it's going to cost $4,000 to put hydro in there. But my thoughts were, just as Ralph and Donna, or Heather had said, that I think the ideal location for their event and also for our Arts Fest is in the town parking lot, which is south of the credit union. Okay. My thoughts would be, I would like to investigate the possibility of putting in some kind of pavilion, sort of like a picnic shelter. That you could use for entertainment of this nature. The Arts Fest group, we're looking at probably spending $1,000 to bring in a stage for that weekend. That this could fill the bill. If you have something that's covered and you have hydro, and to go a little bit further on that, I think it wouldn't even be a bad idea to put in some public washrooms at that point. Now, I know when I brought this up previous council, the concern was, well, the Conservation Authority wouldn't give us permission because you're on the edge of the dam and so on. But I think the music and the Friends of the Vickers Park have a gentleman who would be an excellent person to promote this, as the retired person that ran Durham Park for years and years and years. Would have a connection on the Conservation Authority. And again, it doesn't have to be, it's something we'd have to look at in terms of what kind of building that would be. But to me, it's an ideal location. It's a place that's close to downtown, so the BIA would be happy with it. It gives these people a chance to bring even a busload of seniors in that can park in the parking lot without even having to get off the bus. Mobility, it's accessible, and it's off the highway, which is another issue that they deal with, as you're playing music there and you sit there and the trucks are going by. And sometimes people are wandering in front of those trucks while they're getting across the street. So it's not an ideal location for them. So I think this other location would be ideal, and I would like that maybe our staff, we can investigate this, have some conversation with Conservation Authority, what that might look like. But it could fit the bill for these two events and possibly many, many more, that people may come to our area, pull into the parking lot, have a picnic, sit overlooking the lower dam. So I think it's ideal. So I hope that we would support doing some investigation.
Sure, and I absolutely like the approach you're taking on this very much. I'm just looking for other members of council. Councillor Herger, please.
So I had a concern a couple weeks ago about how much money we would even just spend for electricity. Have we investigated that? We actually don't typically give a location to even other committees of council. So I was just trying to be fair and equal for each committee of council. So I would still like to know what I believe it's probably nominal, the amount of electricity that you're using, but I still would like that to be fair and equitable. Councillor Hutchison, as you've discussed the Riverside Park there is, in our financials today, we approved $2,000 for a consultation design on the Heritage Walkway Bridge Park, which we would expect to be next year sometime. Now, you've mentioned some comments about the Highway 6, the noise, the traffic, but that might be a possibility for next year. So while we would, maybe investigate a location over by the lower dam, I believe the middle dam is already in a design construction. So that might present a new opportunity there and still be close to the river. And then there could be parking on the east end and stuff of the Durham Walkway, Heritage Walkway Bridge. So next year could be all new opportunities of locations. But for this year, I still would like to know the financial cost of doing that. I know there's been a model with the tennis club that when the tennis club uses the tennis courts, they pay for the electricity. So even if it's just something fair and equitable, but I would be in support of continuing the same model as last year. And I do applaud your efforts to utilize and bring out people to enjoy our town.
Yeah, I'm very much in favor of supporting the Friends of Vickers Park, and whether it becomes Friends of a different park, that's quite nice. You know how fabulous events sometimes evolve into something much grander and better along the way. So I would definitely support your initiative. Definitely, I like the idea that Councillor Hutchinson is proposing, and that is to provide more of an investigation. We've got a little bit of work to do in terms of location, what the shelter will look like. We also have a request from our other councillor in terms of the costing effect. So I'm wondering, I'm just going to position it this way for members of council to consider. Perhaps we should, if everybody is in agreement or would consider appointing the various citizens to the committee of council, and then on a secondary note, do further investigation and provide that strategy and investigation results back to council. Councillor Hutchinson, and I know you want to speak yet. Okay.
Further to that, in terms of the cost, yeah, the hydro, I can't see the Arts Fest people going ahead with the hydro this year just because of the cost, but their issue was, can we, if something like this could happen, can they advertise that the funds that were raised through the Arts Fest would go towards some improvement, and without getting specific, maybe it's improvement in the parks, sort of thing. And I know this group, Heather and I have discussed that they're willing to put some money up, and then in the future, the Arts Fest group would put some money up. So it could be a community involvement in terms of getting some funds to help make this happen.
Okay.
It's not going to happen this year, obviously, because of timelines, but in their case, because of the construction, we might have to make something happen on a temporary basis if we're into construction a couple weekends when you're trying to have their event. So we might have to do something temporary. But yeah, there are other people willing to put some money up to help make this happen. I'm not sure if the Highway 6 Heritage Bridge one is ideal just because of the traffic and the size that you might need, but the town parking lot would definitely be a possibility.
Yep. I would agree with you on that. Mr. Clark, you have further.
Just a couple of comments.
Yep.
In terms of the cost for hydro, you were actually talking about amplifiers being plugged in. I mean, we could cover whatever that cost was. We just won't buy your next picnic table for you because we won't have enough money. Basically, what we've done, we've allocated half of our draw for the town's picnic tables. That's not quite, I don't think, what everybody else is necessarily doing when they're, for example, I don't think at the court, anybody who uses that is actually fundraising for the court. I could be wrong. But anyway, that's just a side comment. Typically, we have about $1,000 a year, I think, is what we've spent. And Heather works really hard to spend that money because we're a self-appointed committee. We don't want anybody questioning our motives, so we get that money into picnic tables for the municipality. What we're willing to suggest is, in conjunction with Doug's idea, I think Heather has about $1,000 in her reserve, which was going to be either given to the parks or trails idea or another picnic table or two. We'd be willing to partner with Doug with our $1,000 right off the bat if you could do something with it. In terms of power, what are the chances that the credit union could be approached to give us access to some power receptacle for this season? What my worry is that if we don't make this work this season, there won't be another season.
All right, thank you. Further questions? Councillor Townsend, Councillor Hergert, then Councillor Shea.
Thank you, Ralph. I was going to comment exactly the same thing for this year, because I think your schedule was going to begin June 2nd, if I think the date I heard. And so from that perspective, we don't have a lot of time to really get moving, right? So if we're going to do anything this year over there, and if we could even find someone that has a tent that they could donate for the season, you know, it might take some work up and down, but you know what? If we can get enough volunteers to do it, we should be able to make it work. And, you know, worst come to the worst, maybe we do fundraise and see if we can offset the $4,000 for power. You know, you never know when that'll come in handy in that location anyway. It's got ability to entertain at some point, and that gives us a little time without impeding what you do. I love what you do. I love the music you provide.
There you go.
You know, my wife and I do show up quite regularly because we do enjoy it, and I hate to see it stop. And once you start hedging your bet about whether you have it or you don't, you're right, they usually go away, and I wouldn't want to see that either. So.
Okay, good. Just by way of timeframe, May 21st is our next council meeting, and then there is a council meeting on June 4th. So that's a couple days after your target date of June 2nd to start. So I know there's some investigation that we need to do, and if council is in agreement, and we'll make that determination, I think, rather quickly here. But I would suggest that our manager of community services, and I would also consider Councillor Hutchinson being involved in that, along with the Friends of Vickers Park Music, to address the issue. All right, so Councillor Hergert, then Councillor Shea, please.
My last comment on this would be that we should investigate with Saugeen Valley Conservation first and foremost, and our representatives would be able to advocate for that. Just as it is so close to the bank, without providing power, I think our first step would be to check with Saugeen Valley to see what kind of structure we could have there, if that's at all possible.
Yeah, and that goes without saying, that if there is any dialogue or delegation or item that comes forward, and it is a consideration for our Conservation Authority, that would take place for sure. Councillor Shea.
Yeah, I'd like to reiterate that I support the proposal wholeheartedly and hope that goes ahead, and look forward to seeing you out there at one of those locations. But further to what Doug was saying, about putting in a gazebo and sort of developing that parking lot into a more enticing locale. It's kind of a ugly space right now. And I'm thinking of what they did with that vacant lot in Hanover and turned it into that nice park where they have the buskers and the marketplace and everything like that. So putting a gazebo in there would be one part, but I would suggest that should be part of a larger sort of redevelopment of that area. And I was sort of looking to Stephanie to ask who would brainstorm, a multi-year redevelopment proposal for that area that could then be presented to council over the course of, the following year, including looking for funding sources. I don't know if you could comment to that, Stephanie.
Any comment at this point, Manager Stewart, or do you want to report back on that? It's up to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I would want to strategize with the CIO on this one, just because we want to look at the multi-year budgeting that Council has asked us, and then this project. It does sound like a great idea. I see the vision and where you would like to get to. There has been many communities that have done something like this, where they take kind of that ugly space, as you're calling it, and turn it into a more pleasant and enticing space. We all know that, there's many people that come through Durham, traveling, campers, etc. So it would be great to have a spot that we could entice them to sit down, observe what we have, the beauty we have, and then they might actually stay a little longer too, right? Because they'll start to see what we have and want to explore it further. So I do agree it's a great idea, but we just need a bit more time, I think, with that one.
Good. And I do share your vision. I think that's a great idea, Councillor Shea. Further questions or comments? Councillor Hamilton, please.
Thank you for coming in today and telling us about the history of what you're offering, and for all your volunteer time and giving us something to do on a Sunday night. It's really wonderful, and you have my support moving forward this year. I have a more general question, perhaps for staff. So when committees of council fundraise and raise money, does that money come to West Grey? Is it in our West Grey coffers, or how is that part handled?
Through your worship. Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. Yes, it depends. Each group is a little bit different. Some committees of council, we hold their money in trust. Depending, like say, example, the Elmwood Community Centre Board, the money is held differently. So each group is a little bit different. It is, at the end of the day, this group in particular, it's their choice. If they'd like for the West Grey to hold on to the money, they can. But if they prefer to keep it themselves, that's also fine as well.
So moving forward, as we're talking about how we support our committees and that we have equitable, fair practices, could we add this to the list of to-dos to discuss about how we handle money with our committees? I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, very good idea. Further questions? So, members of council, how would you like to deal with this delegation? And again, thank you very much for your time coming out. Do you want to wait until this comes forward, either at our next council meeting, which I'm suggesting that it comes to our next council meeting? Are you looking at this point maybe to appoint the members to West Grey Council Committee at this point, waiting for the other investigation information? How do you wish to proceed at this point? And I'm looking to the right to me, Councillor Hutchinson, and then I'll go to Councillor Hergert.
Well, I think Stephanie has given us an idea that this could work for this year, sort of like the model that we've had. So I think we'd like to see it move forward because obviously these people have to start making a plan and getting commitments from their musicians and make their schedule. So I'd like to see us continue on with status quo for this year with the thought that we're going to make some changes and maybe move and who knows what all, but do some investigation. So I would like them to go away feeling that they've got the go-ahead so that they can start moving forward rather than waiting another 2 weeks for us to make a decision. So that would be my suggestion.
So a couple things. So within your statement there, just for clarity purposes, are you looking at this point to perhaps just appointing various citizens to a committee, which we could do today by resolution? But you did also mention status quo, so that would mean, in my mind, Vickers Park. So what I'd be looking at is an alternate location. So I wonder if you could just clarify.
Well, I'm just, maybe our director maybe needs to comment because, and I think if you could start in Vickers Park and stay there as long as the construction isn't an issue, because the construction on that end of Lambton Street isn't going to happen until later on this summer, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes, that is
Director, please. Director Glazier.
Your worship, yes, that is correct. So ideally, it's probably going to be towards, I'm guessing, towards the latter part of July-ish is when I see that happening, so.
My thoughts are, is that your intent that you would start it in Vickers Park and then maybe transition to move when the construction starts? Is that what you're thinking, or would that work for you people?
That would probably be the easiest way to start, because then we could, be telling people it was happening, and you know how people don't like change, so you kind of like to, and we also want to let everyone know that we're all working together to make this work, right?
Yes.
It would give us a little more time
Go ahead.
to kind of all think about what.
That's right, and that gives
So
some
we're
time.
thinking it would be into July when we would move.
Correct, that's what our director's
Yeah.
saying before we.
Good. Madam CAO.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My only concern is that the roads are closed right now, and I think we would have time, if council would entertain continuing, it's a bit of what we've done, with the caveat that staff will work with the group prior to the June 1st start to make sure that the location's locked down, hydro's addressed, and some sort of shelter. So I think we have that within our capacity to do that, but we would need them to be appointed by bylaw, and if that could happen today, that would give us the green light to go ahead and fine-tune those details.
Okay, we're hearing that. Councillor Herger, please.
I agree with Madam
Good.
CAO there. Let's appoint the necessary parties and carry on and work for staff to relocate.
All right, so the clerk has prepared a motion for consideration. I'm going to suggest that. Yes, cross all that up. All that. Yep. That's it down there. That's fine. We're just waiting on the proposed motion at this point. Certainly. Councillor Herger, please.
Will we invite other people to join this committee of council along with the Line Fences Act and et cetera?
Well, this is certainly a committee of council, but it's a different type of committee of council. It's very specific to the Friends of Music. So I'm going to position it that way at this point. I'm going to ask for our Manager of Community Services to respond for a bit further.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would encourage members to contact Heather. I'm sure she's always looking for additional support and help. If somebody would like to help and volunteer, I'm assuming this group would be willing to have some more people, and then they could always be added at that time.
Sure, and if there are additional...
I'm sure we would be willing to get more help.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you, Heather. And what I would say is that that's a great solution, that if there are citizens that are interested to work through Heather, Donna, and Ralph, and then those names could be brought forward to council for inclusion on the bylaw. But what I wouldn't at this point be looking for is an advertisement from council. That's where I was going for, that it wouldn't necessarily be generated from this council or staff. Councillor Hutchinson, please.
Yeah, can I just make a suggestion that because the Arts Fest is looking at actually putting in a stage for that weekend, the second weekend in July, that it seems if we're going to put in a stage or put in a tent or something for this group, that we should look at combining that so that we only have to do it once, and if we're going to hook up hydro or whatever, so we may be able to do it together. So I'd like to investigate that possibility, sort of, you know, kill two birds with one stone. I don't like to kill birds, but that's just a thought. Okay.
No, I think that's a fabulous idea. Thank you very much. So anything further? All right, so I do have a motion before me, moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor Hutchinson. Be it resolved that the Council of the Municipality of West Grey hereby appoints the following individuals to the Friends of Music in the Park Committee: Donna Clark, Ralph Clark, Rob McManus, Kay McManus, Heather Wright, and Steve Wright. Any questions? Calling the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Now, I know there will be further work done, further discussion and investigation. Thank you very much for coming out. This is a really great opportunity for a partnership. So best of luck for the music season.
Thank you very much to the council, and we look forward to working with you, Doug, and Stephanie. Thank you very much for your help. I'm certain that we'll be wanting to work a little bit with you. I've just recently joined the rec committee, and I did enjoy the meeting, and very impressed at what things are going on. So I'm sure eventually we're all working for the same reason.
Absolutely, and thank
And
you
that's our
for those
attitude.
positive
Thank you so
comments.
much.
Well done. Thank you for those positive comments.
Stephen, if you play banjo.
All right, we are going to move on right now, and we're holding decorum. So our fourth delegation is Ashley Hamilton, Director of Business Development, Baseload Power Corporation, regarding proposed electric vehicle VE charging station or stations in West Grey. This is, members of council, you know that we normally have, through our procedural bylaw, 4 delegations. There's also an opportunity for the mayor to determine whether a fourth delegation could be placed on an agenda. So I did make that determination that we would accept this fourth delegation, just to receive the information at this point. So please proceed, Ashley Hamilton, and welcome.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having us here today. I do appreciate the accommodation that you made. So I'm here on behalf of Baseload Power. We're a privately held advanced electricity infrastructure and energy solutions provider. Our principals have over 20 years of experience and are responsible for over 600 megawatts of renewable energy projects that are in operation. We are partnered with municipalities on other projects, such as the town of Milton, where we're currently building out an 8 megawatt hour flow battery on Milton municipal property. And we're now working with a number of municipalities as well as private site owners to install, own, and operate electric vehicle charging stations on their properties. And in short, our proposal is to acquire a parking spot on town property where we would cover any and all costs to install, operate, maintain a high-speed level 3 charging station for electric vehicles, and for which your municipality receives a share of the revenue as rent. So in order to make this proposal financially viable, we are applying to NRCan for funding under an RFP. Unfortunately, their deadline for application is May 16th, which is why we're here today. And in order to make that application, we're asking for an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, to be signed. So that is what we're hoping to move towards today after this presentation. But a little bit more on our proposal. It's a zero-cost proposal for you and your municipality. We cover everything from insurance to installation, the electrical infrastructure that needs to be upgraded, snow removal, anything regarding maintaining this will be on us, and in turn we give you a share of the revenue that we generate. We also think that the electric vehicle stations demonstrate a commitment to your green and clean community, and the chargers that we're putting in, the level 3 chargers, are an 18 to 25 minute charge, so it's a big step up from the level 2s that are more common right now, which are a 4 to 8 hour charge. These chargers are more meant for people who are commuting or driving through or going camping, it sounds like, which happens in this area. It's for people who are kind of highway drivers or commuters. And how do I go to the next slide? Oh, thank you. Oh. So our product, we're partnered with Add Energy, which is a Canadian company. They manufacture in Quebec. and it is a universal charger, so it works for everything from a Tesla to a Leaf. It uses the two main plugs, which are currently the standard. Tesla drivers have a separate plug, but they actually come with a converter, so they can use ours as well. It comes with its own cellular connection, so people can locate it on a map online. There's various different apps and stuff that can be used to do so. They can actually book it ahead of time if they know that they're going to be driving through, and they can see if it's available or if it's in use and how much more time is on somebody else's charge. So they can stop in somewhere and buy a coffee if they know they have to wait 15 minutes. And it has year-round accessibility. That's one of our requirements under NRCan for the funding, is that we need to make sure that it's an accessible location that people can get to year-round. So we will provide the maintenance to ensure that that happens. And thank you. Oh, and it's for public use. Sorry, I should say that too. We are not, no one has to join a network or anything to use ours. Anybody can access it. And we have a 24/7 phone line in case there's any issues. And our process. So we're hoping to obtain approval from council to move forward and work with your staff to find a site location, at which point we would locate a site within your township that has obviously a parking spot available, a phase 3 line running on hopefully the same side of the street to keep our costs down for installation, and one that would make sense, I guess, for your town as far as not being a spot where parking is perhaps at a premium, but a spot where is close to a busy road or a highway where we would get enough traffic for it to make sense. And if we can do all that and get an MOU signed, we'll apply for funding with NRCan next week on May 16th, after which, if we get the funding, we have 18 months to install, though we would hope to do it a lot sooner, because the sooner we get it in the ground, the sooner we all start generating some revenue. And I think that, and this is our memorandum of understanding. A few brief points on it. It basically goes, it is to negotiate a lease in good faith should we get the funding. And the lease would be up for council approval as well, so nothing would be further signed without us coming back to present the terms of lease to you. We're looking for a 20-year commitment. It's a substantial investment on our end in order to install this. So that would be kind of our way of getting our money back out of it and hopefully having a long-term partnership with you as a municipality. And it also outlines that you're fully indemnified, that we would be fully insuring it, and again, the maintenance, snow clearing, and things that I mentioned before. So I think that's about.
All right, well,
Yes.
thank you very much, Ashley Hamilton, for the delegation. We very much appreciate it. Questions from our members of council? All right, Councillor Hutchinson, then Councillor Hamilton.
I have a few, but I'll start with a couple. Where are the electric charging stations available now? I know there's one in Hanover. In this area that you're looking at, do you have any now, and where are they?
We don't. I can send you a map of our partner, Add Energies. They've installed a network before under the last year's RFP process. I'd be happy to send you a map. There's also a link on the NRCan website that shows where all of the ones have been installed or are permitted to be installed through their program.
Okay, so this map that you're showing on in your presentation.
Those are the municipalities that we're currently working with.
Okay, so that's proposed, or it's not necessarily there yet?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, all right. According to your website, you're in the business of power in terms of solar power, wind power,
Yep.
battery power, all
Yes.
kinds of different power. Okay, I thought that was
Yes.
interesting. 20 years, technology changed a lot in 20 years.
It
So
absolutely does.
are you willing to upgrade and change your station if technology changes?
We expect that it will change. We expect that it'll actually probably change within 10 years, and it's up to us to replace it. And we would be happy to do so, because that will be, to all of our benefit.
Yeah, okay, thank you for now.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you for the presentation. Are you looking at municipal parking lots, or can it be on the roadside of a municipality, or how does that typically work?
As long as there's access for someone to drive in and park, obviously, so it would have to be some sort of parking pad or asphalt area. We've looked at arenas, town halls, community centers, rec centers, pools, generally somewhere that has a power draw that's large enough to support the Phase 3 line outside and a transformer is kind of our ideal, but.
Okay,
yeah.
and can you explain the power draw part? How do you get electricity to your charger?
That is a great question. So we are paying for the infrastructure to be installed. So generally, we're putting in a new transformer in most locations. And then we are paying the hydro company to run a wire with a separate meter to our unit. And then we will be paying a totally separate electrical charge. So none of that comes back to the municipality.
Okay, and so how many units does it make it worth for you to put the transformer in and put all that infrastructure in?
We're looking to only do one to begin with, and then if it gets busy over time, we'd love to come back and revisit if it makes sense for everybody to expand. But at this point, under NRCan guidelines, they're looking to do one at a time.
Okay, and if you were to go bankrupt tomorrow, is there anything in here that speaks to, what's the word I'm looking for, to decommission that unit, or to
Right.
remove that unit should your company
Go bankrupt? That's a
Yeah.
very interesting question. We would be happy to add that language in. We certainly are responsible to decommission the project. I haven't been asked the question about bankruptcy, but I know we put that into our wind and solar, like lease agreements before, certainly. So we would be happy to work that language into this as well.
I think that would be a good piece to cover.
Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Harker, please.
Okay, I recently watched a CBC marketplace, and they're driving around, and there's just literally not enough of these electric charging locations for the distance that they can drive. So I do know that there is one in Minto, and there is one in Mount Forest as well. You had mentioned Hanover, Councillor Hutchison. There are other companies then that do this as well, right? Schneider Electric has been generous in Mount Forest to donate the equipment, and it is on a municipal parking lot there. I guess I would be interested to know any other companies. Are we going to competitively offer this out to others? I did also have written down the upgrade to technology. It's not really written in here that you would have to do that. So, you know, it makes sense, business case profitability, that we would do that. Are the shares of revenue negotiable? It is a contract, right? So it's negotiable?
Sure. I think the first share, up to $200,000, is basically until we get our costs out. That's why the first share is at 3%. After that, we are open to negotiate, for sure.
Okay. I guess I'm curious about what type of income have you realized off of other charging stations? I mean, it sounds like the Milton project is much bigger and not even comparable to this.
That's a flow battery, so that's actually a transmission level storage solution versus a car battery.
So do you have a car battery location up and going yet?
This is our first foray into this type of distributed type project. We've done other distributed generation with solar and wind. But our partner Add Energy has done this before. They actually manufacture and they own sites. They're partnered with Canadian Tire and a few other large companies. So we'd be happy to bring them in to answer any of those questions. As far as the income generated, that's a very tough question right now because we are of the if you build it, they will come mentality. I think a lot of the reason why people aren't buying electric vehicles and the federal government is of the same thinking is because there aren't enough charging stations to drive to a cottage or to drive to go camping. You can kind of drive around town and go back and charge at home, but you can't actually go somewhere and get back without having what we call is like range anxiety, which is not knowing if your battery is going to die on the way home. So we're having a hard time projecting our income, but we kind of have our minimum requirement to make sense. And we're hopeful that we can make that, especially because it is such a long commitment. Certainly in 10 years, there will be more electric vehicles on the road. And certainly in 20 years, hopefully significantly more. The federal government is hoping that by 2040, 100% of light use vehicles will be electric. So we'll probably see things become profitable later in the term, but we are keen to be first movers in this type of thing.
I actually really like that this would put Durham West Grey on the map. Like it's important to be on those maps because otherwise people don't come. They don't know it's there, right? So I guess I was curious about the amount of money from the grant that would.
Sure.
The deadline is very short. It's
It is
next
very
week, right?
short. I appreciate that.
So
we are
how much
under
money
the wire.
is the grant worth?
So the grant is worth $50,000.
Okay.
It is a minimum of $100,000 to install a charging station. Our connection costs are estimated between $65,000 and $100,000, generally speaking, between putting in a transformer and meter and concrete pad and construction crews, and the actual unit is about $50,000 itself. And then there's, of course, overhead and administration and everything else that goes into making this happen. So that is the funding that makes it like financially viable, and I say that with air quotes because it's financially viable over the term
Of 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Curious also about how much power does it use? I mean, I guess it depends on how many people come, right? And how many
Yep.
people would be charging. How much energy does it use per charge? Like a full charge? Does that depend on vehicle as well?
It does. It's 18 to 25 minutes, a 50 kilowatt charger, so it's pretty heavy duty in its electrical consumption. I don't think I mentioned this before. It's $20 per hour billed to the second to the consumer, which is a market rate, and it will stay with the market rate. That's written into the contract, I believe, but we will stay with whatever the current rates are. But how much does it use? I don't know how to break that down into
Here's
a
where I'm
kilowatt
going
hour.
with it.
Yeah.
A couple years ago on the Middle Dam, we had somebody come and ask us about water power generation. So if
Right.
this is really truly going to be green energy,
Yeah.
why wouldn't we be asking you to tap into some natural resource?
Oh, we would
to
love
power?
to.
Is there enough energy there to power? one
There
of
is,
these?
as well, we will talk to your LDC, but generally we haven't had any issues with upstream capacity to pull this type of power for a single station. If you're putting in a Tesla bank, it might be different with 8 chargers somewhere. But for a single charger, it hasn't been an issue to date. I mean, in the future, if you'd like to talk about energy solutions that are green, we would love to have that conversation
Well,
because
I
that's
guess
more.
I wasn't thinking of just opening that up for all, and I was
Yes,
thinking
no, I know.
if we're trying to get people to use electric vehicle charging stations, why aren't we doing it green energy as well? So it's kind of like another further step of it.
I don't disagree with you. At this point, there isn't the time to create that type of solution and apply for the funding, if that makes sense, because those projects usually take about 3 years of permitting and environmental studies and other things to get off the ground.
And is there a permit system from the government? Like this is a grant opportunity.
Right.
Is there a permitting system for?
It has to meet a
standard?
Yes, quite a few standards and criteria in order to get approved. And then we would actually go to your town to see if we need a building permit or what type of permits we would require to do the installation. And of course, there'd be electrical permits, obviously.
Councillor
to
Herger,
get-
I am now going to ask that there are other councillors that have questions, so thank you for your time. I can circle back to you, but there are other members of council that would like to ask questions, starting with, first of all, Deputy Mayor Hutchinson and then Councillor Shea. Yes.
Thank you. My only question, well, I have a few, but I'm going to keep it short. I don't think one spot's big enough because your transient traffic's going to be pulling small trailers, et cetera. I think you're looking, myself, probably 2 to 3 spots because what are you going to drop the trailer off, get in there one spot and go back and hook it up? So that's something that is a
To think
concern
about.
to myself.
Sure.
Okay, Councillor Shea.
Are you only partnering with municipalities?
No, we're partnering with private site owners as well.
Right, so this seems like a very enticing, well-structured financial proposal that you're making.
Yep.
We're not really in the business of business. We're in the
Right.
business of running a municipality. Would you think about partnering with our home hardware, our grocery store, or one of our other retailers that has a large parking lot?
Absolutely.
Because they may be able to respond to this more quickly than we can.
I don't disagree. Our president is quite a fan of working with government partners. But yes, that is why we're actually doing both at this time, to try to work through both, but yeah.
Good. I mean, I think it was really important for you to come forward as a delegation, and we thank Baseload Power Corporation for having an interest in West Grey. What I'm hearing from our members of council, that there's a lot of questions. Certainly, due diligence needs to take place, and I'm not certain that within the tight time frame that you have, certainly that we don't have, it will achieve that due diligence. And I'm speaking not only of the questions that have been proposed here, but also we have to look at our operational component, and that is, can we factor in snow clearing and sweeping, and just because it's a 24-hour type access. So can our municipal operations manage that? And certainly we would need to vet the MOU. Also, it would take I think we would very much need to look at this in a more broader perspective rather than just single source. I think it's a bigger picture than just looking at this one funding opportunity that you are suggesting for your company for an endorsement of West Grey and how that would really look. So at this point, from my perspective anyway, I would be looking at a more thorough due diligence of vetting out all the issues and the application within West Grey overall. And perhaps this is something that would be a super good discussion for sustainability committee as one of our starter topics for it. Anyway, having said that, Councillor Townsend now has the floor.
Yeah, I was actually going to go down a similar path to Councillor Shea. I was going to say, for example, if you went to the gas station, which already supplies fuel to some degree, I realize they don't have the kind of hours you might want, but maybe they're willing to do it. And maybe therefore you get involved in a chain rather than just one, right? So that's advantageous to you. I like the idea of the bankruptcy. I look at it in a little different light if you can't provide the service, and again, the devil's in the details. So when you sign an MOU, you generally want to know what those details are, even at a high level. So if we were to proceed, I would have asked for a copy of a sample agreement, if you will, just so you get a feeling as to what one would look like.
Right.
And if there's other issues and concerns.
Right.
And then are you prepared to go into a memorandum of understanding given that, or has that become a huge negotiation thing as well? But I like the idea of keeping that, in the private sector and keeping it with someone who's already providing the service.
Okay.
So, for what
Thank you
it's worth.
for
I appreciate the feedback.
Okay, Councillor Hamilton, and then I'm going to circle back to Councillor Hergert.
Thank you. Is there anything in the MOU that would preclude other businesses or free station? I don't know how you would provide it for free, but just for other people to provide charging stations in West Grey? This wasn't exclusive, was it?
No, it's not.
Okay,
it's
thank
not
you.
exclusive at all.
And my last question is, if you're investing in the infrastructure of the putting all the electricity in, would you be in a position to rent that infrastructure to another company who has chargers, or sharing of the infrastructure?
That's not something we've put our heads to date.
Okay.
But if that's something that would make it more palatable, we're certainly open to.
I was just considering the
having that
investment that you're putting into
Sure.
and all that electricity, and
Yeah.
for it to only benefit your company, you might see other companies wanting to join in with their chargers as well.
Right.
Just an idea. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you. I'll do Councillor Hergert. Okay, thank you for that indication, Councillor Hergert. You don't have a question at this point. Councillor Hutchinson then, please.
Yeah, so I applaud you for coming to us, because this is an issue that I've raised before, previous council, that I think we do need to take a lead on getting some charging stations out there, and if we don't do it and it becomes private, that's fine, but at least you're out there trying to make it happen. We know there is a need and there's a demand for it. So yeah, I'd like to see us support it in one way or another, whether we do it ourselves or whether we support it happening in our area, because it's coming and we need to be on board. And this is the first person that I can recall coming to us and saying, hey, let's put in a charging station. Before it was like, oh no, that's something down the road, we don't have to worry about that, but it's here and we need to do something with it. So however that works, I know the timeline is always, the short timelines are very difficult for us and for everybody involved, but I think there's going to be more opportunities. If we don't get it this time, there'll be more opportunities. I just wondered, I wouldn't mind hearing from our director and his thoughts in terms of, is this something that we might look at down the road? And because we do have to maintain it for the area, particular winter, for 24-hour parking and or 24-hour, parking. So that's, but again, it's an economic development driver, I think, in that people park downtown and they got half an hour to go shopping while their vehicle's charging. So why not,
I'm thinking that at the most suitable time, and I'm looking to our Director of Infrastructure and Public Works as well as our CAO, I would very much like on behalf of council, to have a balanced report on this. Just a future visioning in terms of getting West Grey future ready for this, but ready now for that future opportunity. So I'm wondering if that's something that we could just consider, be ready for with respect to, well, does it work for West Grey, I think is another question. And then cite some possible locations, but also look at operational considerations. And certainly, even if a company is paying for the cost of labor and equipment, it still factors into that time and equipment being allocated to that particular area versus somewhere else within the operational plan the director has in mind already. So I'm wondering if that could occur at some point where we would have that report and have a more further discussion. So I'm putting it over to the staff table now.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. One of the councillors, I'm forgetting if it was Deputy Mayor Hutchison or Councillor Shea, indicated the problem with the trailers. And, I didn't think of that because the CA and I were just talking. I was trying to gather where we could put this infrastructure. I was thinking here at the municipal building possibly as one spot. I also thought with the land that we currently own downtown, the only one I could come up with was the parking lot across from the arena, the police station. And again, the logistics of traffic and trailers and things, we would have to remove the parking or reduce the amount of parking that would be available just for that. So that idea kind of was blown apart, but it was a good point. That's something I never thought of the trailers. So I know the FS store or some of the other businesses along Garrett Faxa Street, especially because it's a north-south commuter route, especially in the summertime for vacationers.
Yeah.
That would actually be an ideal someplace on that corridor where there would be a charging station for vehicles, especially there. I'm not sure so much east-west, but I'm just thinking also, not to mention Ayton. There's an opportunity at Ayton because we have the arena there. There's a lot of commuters that come up, and there's lots of room there that we could put possibly a charging station there. So again, looking at other communities, because Newstead, Ayton, they all have a vast amount of summer traffic that goes through those communities. So if we could put one in the urban centers, that would be probably a great benefit to the commuters that seek that kind of charging stations. So.
Okay, thank you for that. That's a comprehensive answer. Before I go to Councillor Herger, I would like to go to our town clerk, please.
I did have a conversation with Jonathan Sandler. He's the president of Baseload. He had indicated by phone conversation late last week that some of the potential sites they're looking at is the Durham Arena and Newstead Arena. The Normanby Arena would perhaps be an ideal site as well, but those are two he had mentioned as possible sites.
Yeah. Which would take some looking into for sure. Councillor Herger, please.
Just curious, has this grant opportunity come up before?
It's a 5-year opportunity, and they open one window a year. So this is the 3rd year. So there'll be 2 more years, but this is the last year that it's open across Canada. The next 2 years, we've been told, are to fill in the gaps. So they're going to be very specific about where they will provide funding geographically, and it won't be quite as open to everybody.
Okay.
I was just thinking, I don't think we're agile enough to be able to make that deadline right now. We do have a lot of due diligence work to do. I guess the only other thing I was thinking about is as we sit as Committee of Adjustments and we plan subdivision agreements, is there an opportunity when we're building 250 homes that that we look at that, putting this requirement into a subdivision agreement. I think it might be another way to support it.
See the ideas that get generated at this council table. Very good. All right, Councillor Hutchinson, I'm cognizant of the time.
I'm just curious, what kind of profit would we be looking at to do this?
As far as the percentage,
Yes,
so
for this municipality.
so our current outline is 3% for the first 200,000, and then it goes to 5 and 10 for the next 2 to 4, and then 4 and onwards.
So is that reasonable that you would make 200,000 on this in a year?
Probably not in a year in this municipality, for sure. It's not per year, that's over the life of the charter.
Over the life,
So
okay.
once you hit 200,000, we don't go back to 3% the following year. It's,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Just thinking that it's an opportunity to raise some money. It's really not costing us a lot of money to put it in, other than we have to provide the snowplow service in the wintertime. That would be the biggest
Just to
issue.
clarify, we do actually provide snow clearing. Provided we
you're
would have permission from you to clear on your property, we are keen to provide that
Okay, I thought I read
service.
in here that we had to look after that part of it, but, so it is a bit of a incentive in terms of monies that might be coming into our municipality, which is a good thing, and I do think if we look at it, we would look at doing 3 stations rather than just Durham. So 1 in Newstead, 1 in Ayton. And I'm not so sure if the arena is ideal in each location, just because of when you park for half an hour, you want to have something to do. And if you're sitting in someplace not close to a store or a coffee shop or something else to look at, then close to downtowns would be better, I think, if that was possible.
All right, good. Are we able to wrap this up, this one, and just say thank you very much for your delegation. We really appreciate you coming forward to West Grey Council. I'm hearing a lot of due diligence. The item is certainly not off the table for looking at this type of opportunity for West Grey. So we'll leave it at that then. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Members of Council, item 11, which is business arising from the previous meeting. We do not have anything at this point. We've addressed the staff reports and the bylaws. We are now swiftly moving to item 14, which is new business. Councillor Shea indicated lifting C1 from the miscellaneous correspondence. That is correspondence from Jeff and Karen Bites regarding a letter, Kennedy Bridge. So I will need a 2/3 vote to lift this. 2/3 represents 5 members of council. So I am calling the vote to lift this item for discussion. All those in favor? Okay, it does carry. There's no member of council opposed to that. All right, so under new business, we have addressed it. It will come as a direct motion, which falls under item 16. Are there any other items of new business, recognizing we have a tight time frame at this point? Councillor Hergert, yep.
I received a call about the Normanby Fire Department being out on Side Road 25, just south of Grey Road 9. And actually the concern was for their own safety. They were taking up the entire width of the road, and there was no signage about road closed. There was, people can turn right off of that road and they're right there. I guess I'm looking for some sort of notification to the public, even if it's a sign at the end of the road, just for their own safety. I mean, they're busy, and they're a big group of trucks and firefighters out there training. And the caller was actually very, like, we need to have them training. We appreciate them doing the training, but just for their own safety, that there would be some just road closed or some kind of public notification that you can't go through that road on Side Road 25 in Normanby.
Very good, and I appreciate you bringing that to the council table. I know that will be addressed through our fire chief, and I do note that our chief administrative officer is diligently taking notes on that, so thank you for that. Further? Nope, nothing further. Okay, I appreciate that for item 14. Item 15 is addendums. Clerk Turner, there are no addendums. All right, item 16, notice of motion, which is notice of motion or direct motion, and at this point we're dealing with the direct motion, dealing with this item C1. One moment, please. I'm getting some consultation from our clerk. Certainly, please advise all of council.
So with the two-thirds majority, it does go from miscellaneous correspondence to new business, so I assume it's just a discussion point at this point. So there's no
Right.
resolution pending, at least now.
Right.
At present.
Is that good? But that's good for clarification. So, you're right. So we're just looking for a direct motion. But that, please go ahead.
No, it's just going to be some discussion, whether or not it evolves into a motion or not. I guess we'll determine after the discussion. So I believe
okay.
Councillor Shea requested that be lifted or moved to new business. So it's probably incumbent for Mr. Shea or Councillor Shea to present what he wishes to discuss.
At this time.
Yeah.
Thank you for the redirect for me. I appreciate that. Councillor Shea.
Right, I didn't want to make a motion about this in particular, but I did want to have discussion about it because my question was, how are we going to reply to this query? I'm not saying that we absolutely necessarily need to respond to every single query that comes from every single citizen in a letter to council, but this was a very thoughtful and carefully crafted inquiry, and they could have shared the same information via delegation. And if they had come via delegation, I think we would have said to them, you know, we're on it, we're going to be looking at this down the road. We would have given them some indication of how their information was being treated. So I'm hoping that there is some plan to reply to this correspondent, just to say we received your correspondence, is being considered in our upcoming debates, or something to that effect.
And I think that's very important to do. I do know that both Karen and Jeff Bites are following the progress that this council is making with regard to our bridge studies, specifically for their concern of the Kennedy Bridge. So they're very in tune with the process. So certainly a letter of acknowledgement receipt is fine, but I would also suggest that this letter, and if we do receive any other letters from our community, be included within our discussion of the bridges. So we've got another bridge meeting coming up, and this is, we're just going to know that when we speak about the Kennedy Bridge, we have some correspondence that we need to address at the same time. So very good point, and I'm glad you pulled this item from miscellaneous correspondence, and it certainly would fold part of our discussion with the bridges. Okay, so fair enough. So with that, you're not looking for a motion on that? Okay, that is just fine. Councillor Hamilton, please.
Further to Councillor Shea, just a question about process. How does a letter appear on our agenda? Is it when a letter's written to our clerk, or when does it come to our agenda? And does the letter writer, are they aware that it's going to the agenda? Are they aware that it's going to be made in a public document?
So for this particular correspondence, I did receive contact from Karen and Jeff in terms of not being able to attend that particular meeting, but how could they address their concern with regard to the temporary closure of this bridge, and how could their voices be heard? So suggesting attendance at any of our committee, the whole or council meetings with regard to our bridge considerations, sending an email, sending a formal letter, you know, whether it meant a petition. So they were speaking with staff. Any one of these activities, I think, is important. They have determined, as a result, to provide a letter to council. And then within that time, we would address it within the specific study of the bridges. So that's the process underway. Certainly that's open to any issue with regard to what members of council will be dealing with. Okay, please go ahead.
So just to clarify, just more generally speaking, how does a letter end up on our agenda? Is it when a public citizen writes a letter to our clerk, or what is that process?
Clerk Turner, could you respond in terms of the administrative process, also according to our procedural bylaw?
Thank you.
Yep.
So typically, if a letter or an email is addressed to council, then it does go to council. There might be some times where it's addressed to council, but we as staff feel it's a more an administrative matter, and we can reach out, and if we can solve that issue, then it doesn't necessarily have to come to council. So It's, you know, it depends. It may be an issue that's more related to administrative, it may be an issue more related to public works, and therefore it could be vetted through the appropriate staff member's report, or it may be just put towards miscellaneous correspondence. Knowing that this particular issue was being ensuing discussion through committee of the whole meetings, and then knowing as well that there are going to be public meeting formats and opportunities for other individuals to come forward and present either by written correspondence or verbal presentations, that it's felt appropriate to, I put this in miscellaneous correspondence for information purposes. So, but yes, it would likely be appropriate just to inform the Bets is that the letter has been received, and noting the opportunities that will be provided in the near future with some public meetings that will be held on bridges matters.
Does that answer?
I think so. So is it possible that someone could write a letter to council, but council wouldn't be aware it was addressed to council? It goes to staff? Is that what I'm hearing?
If a letter is addressed to the mayor and
Yeah.
council, or to council, it does get to this table.
It does,
In whatever agenda, whether it's a council agenda, committee of the whole planning. All
Okay.
right, you do see it.
Great, thank
Okay?
you.
Yeah.
And is that person who wrote the letter aware that it's hitting a public document that will be uploaded to the website? Are they made aware of that?
In terms of being a public letter, it's a letter to mayor, members of council, so we deal with items in a public manner here, unless, of course, it's under the 14 conditions under the Municipal Act that says that it has to be an in-camera.
Okay.
So the document or their issue is public. Now, that's from my perspective and my vantage point. Clerk Turner, do you have anything to say from an administrative perspective?
I think I would echo your comments. If it's addressed to council, there should be the realization that it will be discussed in open forum. Again, unless it becomes a legal matter, for instance, and that would be vetted through closed session.
Okay.
Yep, that makes sense for me, sitting on council. I don't know that everyone in the public would be aware of that when they're writing a letter. So I'm just, as a communication piece, but maybe we could talk, I could bring this up again another time when we're talking about a procedural bylaw perhaps. But just, I know we have an awareness of how public this is and that there's only certain times to go into closed session. But I do think there's been times when a resident's writing a letter thinking it's going to council's eyes and not necessarily aware that it's going to be a public document for the whole world to see. So just keeping that communication open with our citizens.
Well, I think that's a very unique perspective that I've never come across in my
Okay.
time within local government. So how I would respond to that is that when a letter does come in, it does go either to me directly, because it might say mayor, members of council, and also there'd be letters that would be received through our clerk or CAO. If there, upon reading it, is a sensitivity items, if it's items that relate to an in-camera, that is vetted through our staff and also myself. So we have that built-in process, but if an item is public and it is for an agenda or you know, for council's awareness, then it becomes a public document. So that's an interesting perspective, but we do have we do vet the letter in terms of the sensitivity component. So I think, please rest assured that way. In terms of citizens being aware of that, there would be an acknowledgement of the letter, and then it would be addressed in terms of the process by which that would be handled.
Okay.
Would that be correct, Madam CAO and Clerk?
Okay.
Yeah, a sensitive item wouldn't if it was an in-camera item, like confidential, shall I say, that would not be made public.
Okay. And thank you for that clarity. And I am speaking very generally, to also be
fair enough.
clear. Okay, thank you.
We always have learning moments, and I think that's a great opportunity. I'm being very cognizant of the time. Councillor Townsend.
Okay, you know that we are doing a review of the procedural bylaw. Be careful, it's how council operates, not administrative processes, and that would be an administrative process when it comes in, and a decision-making how it happens. So it's not really part of the procedural bylaw.
It's, yeah, there's two distinctions. Thank you very much for that.
Yes.
Appreciate it. All right, are we moving on from new business? I think that's a really great discussion point. Councillor Shea, you determined that there was no direct motion looking for on that. All right. Item 15, we've already identified as no addendums. Item 16, are there any notice of motion or direct motions, members of council? Seeing none, I can flip the page on the agenda, and that is item 17 now. Is that correct? Yeah, item 16 through to item 17, closed session incomplete items. That is an NA. Item 18, matters arising from the closed session, incomplete items only, NA. Item 19 is question period. Are there any questions? All right, thank you. No questions. I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, you're quite right, Mr. Miller. Appreciate that. Item 20, Municipal Act notices. Clerk Turner has identified none. I'm looking for an adjournment on item 21. Councillor Hutchinson, Councillor Hamilton, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you very much, members of council.